One of the highlights of Elden Ring's incredible DLC has to be the new cast of characters that journey alongside you. For me, they're some of the best FromSoft has ever made, from Thiolier's personal growth to the simple wisdom of Mor's view on the world. Their stories didn't just enrich the experience travelling through the Land of Shadow, but fleshed out the lore of Elden Ring as a whole. And for me, the greatest legend of all was undoubtedly that of Sir Ansbach, whose tale is not just charming and emotional, heroic and exciting, and so much more, but it is fundamentally important, shedding light on tons of key aspects of Elden Ring, both large and small. Ansbach upturns our previous understanding of the Mohgwyn Dynasty. He properly illustrates the nature of Miquella's power, and of Radahn's character. His wisdom, that which Gideon could only dream of, elucidates the nature of Empyreans and of godhood just as much as it does the common folk. And though Ansbach's quest ends with his death, we can make sure that his wisdom and his honourable legacy lives on. After working with the DLC for some time now, I think Ansbach is the most important character for understanding the story of Shadow of the Erdtree. More than Miquella or Trina, more than Leda or Hornsent, even more than Messmer. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Dark Souls and Elden Ring lore. Ansbach can be found from the outset of the DLC, and his first impression immediately establishes his strength of character.
My fighting days are far behind me, which is why I have chosen to dedicate myself to investigation, to discern tender Miquella's ultimate purpose. I'd rather not volunteer service to a new master unless I know that I can be of use.
Each of Miquella's followers has their own background and motivations for being there, but while under the charm of Miquella, Ansbach is the only one whose convictions remain at the forefront, where he consciously refuses to act until he can make an informed decision.
To discern tender Miquella's ultimate purpose. I'd rather not volunteer service to a new master unless I know that I can be of use.
To this end, he requests the Tarnished to work with them, and to share any knowledge they may find at the crosses left by Miquella. Here, I'd like to draw comparison to another Sir in Elden Ring, Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing. Ansbach and Gideon's stories share a lot of parallels, and I think Gideon serves as an apt comparison that highlights how Ansbach succeeds where Gideon fails. Ansbach introduces himself in a manner that shows his wisdom. He is humble and communicative, informing the Tarnished of what they likely seek, where he comes from, how he can be of help, and where he stands regarding Miquella. After all, Miquella's followers are all weighing up their comrades, who is capable, who is trustworthy, something that becomes more apparent once Miquella discards his Great Rune. Ansbach is concise, but respectful. Meanwhile, Gideon asserts his wisdom, telling the Tarnished he is their senior. He is then rude, abrupt, and quick to jump to conclusions.
Try not to make a spectacle of yourself either. Or are you as irredeemably foolish as you appear?
Similarly, when we are finally worth his time, he seeks to engage our cooperation either by instruction or by giving direction.
You now belong to a select group of fellows. As such, I ask that you remain constant. You'll be after more great runes now, eh? Then as your fellow, allow me to divulge a little knowledge.
Ansbach simply requests you to share your findings with him, appealing to your natural alignment at this stage, and is happy to give information right from the start.
Sir Mor is a kind and stalwart ally. He provisions our little outfit.
We'll return to Gideon later, but keep his methods in mind as we learn more about Ansbach. When the Tarnished finds Miquella crosses, Ansbach can be spoken to for further insight. Without him, these crosses would be difficult to pass, and no others help to explain what each may mean. Because of this, for me at least, Ansbach became the hub of the DLC, the place I'd be keen to return to anytime I made significant progress, where I was excited to learn more. Like us, Ansbach is unsure exactly what Miquella intends, but he is open about this.
Righteous Tarnished, I have reasoned through my findings concerning kind Miquella's intentions. Why he is here. The full picture is yet to coalesce, but we do know that he is bound for the Tower of Shadow, and that is where he intends to rise to true godhood. The Tower of Shadow houses a divine gateway. A well-kept secret it was, but The gateway was once the birthplace of a god we know all too well.
A couple interesting things here. First is that Ansbach has the wisdom to be aware that he does not have the full picture, and to be flexible in his working theory. And the second is the phrasing, the Tower of Shadow houses a divine gateway. Though this is speculative, the word a rather than the implies Ansbach has some form of knowledge for the means behind a divine gateway. He knows that another either has already been made, or could be made again in the future. We'll look at Miquella, his powers, gods and Empyreans shortly, but here I want to focus on Ansbach's character during the journey, because what stands out to me is how human he is, and how honest he is about his shortcomings.
Kindly Miquella has discarded his great rune. The fog that vexed my aging faculties has been lifted, and follies better left forgotten haunt me once again.
Note the word follies here. This is how Ansbach perceives whatever it is that has returned to him, something which, despite his fear, he goes on to pursue.
Righteous tarnished. Miquella the Kind makes my blood run cold. I am loath to admit it, but even at this very instant I wish to run very far away indeed. It's been some time. After unburdening my soul to you, I had hoped to make a fresh start, but there was one thought I could not dislodge from my mind. So, here I am, quite unable to move on.
At first his intentions seem to derive from honour for his former lord, but this is only part of the truth, as we will soon see.
After Lord Mohg's slaying at his dynastic palace, it appears his body has been absconded with. After failing him in every regard, I'd do anything to make amends, in whatever meager way I can.
And again, compare how Ansbach carries out his own affairs despite the danger, to Gideon, who gets others to do his dirty work and bring information back to the safe Round Table hold for him. With the help of the Tarnished, Ansbach discovers that Miquella plans to use the corpse of Mohg as the vessel of his king consort. Again, the lore implications are big here and will be discussed later, but what I want to highlight now is how often he makes use of the word folly once again, which means a lack of good sense or foolishness.
Should have known. Even the truth was itself mere folly. Such folly. Unto the end, the absolute folly of it all.
When I first heard this dialogue, I assumed he meant the folly of the situation, of Miquella's intent and his methods, and how Ansbach finds himself somehow on both sides of the conflict. But as I looked more closely into Ansbach, I realised how little he actually comments on others. Almost always, he is actually reflecting only on what he can be sure of, himself, his own actions. I think he is calling himself foolish. Foolish for missing what was happening right in front of him, of course, but foolish for reasons beyond that. Ansbach is self-deprecating not to appear charming or modest. He is critical of himself because he sees his own nature clearly. He sees that he is no perfect model of humanity. He sees a man who has faults in his beliefs, his morals, and his methods. He is flawed, and he knows it. But similarly, he also accepts that humanity, and all of us, cannot hope to be perfect. I think this is a core tenet of Ansbach's wisdom, and will be important later. He then indulges this flawed side of him, and chooses to manipulate those around him to carry out what he is too afraid to.
Righteous Tarnished, could you please give this to Freya? Thanks to you, she too will have the answer she requires. Freya possesses a youth I no longer have. This knowledge will surely stoke the flames of valor within her. Yes. I can see her barreling into the fray right now.
Whether what he does is right or not, at the very least he made this decision consciously.
Perhaps I shouldn't meddle in her affairs, but this is the only way I can help.
I know it would pain old Jeren, but war has always suited General Radahn best, and certainly far more than any honorable death. Endless war to invigorate the soul. as befits General Radahn, the Great Lion.
Before the DLC, Jeren was probably our best resource for trying to understand Radahn's character. As we looked at in our timeline video, despite his integral role in the game's plot, he has no words, and little in the way of history save for the Starscourge conflict and the Battle of Aeonia. And though the well-informed Ansbach also has the same opinion of Radahn as we've had from the base game, through his interaction with Freya, we learn two things. One, that Radahn must have been a highly guarded figure. Despite his fame, he must have been careful not to let those outside his trusted circle get to know him. And two, that Radahn was not particularly focused on honour. Perhaps he wanted to fight for what he saw as good, but here it becomes clear that if the choice is fighting for something he doesn't believe in, or not fighting at all, he would have chosen endless warfare, not particularly honourable in the end. And yet once again, Ansbach respects this perspective, despite his familiarity with the allure of combat. So the plan to get Freya to help fails, and Ansbach confirms that his motivation was indeed not born from complete logic, but from strong emotions.
Paralyzing fear. True despair.
By admitting his own faults in ways like this, Ansbach no longer expects perfection from others either, which is how he is always somehow understanding, no matter what happens.
The way the world is, I'd say it's a wonder people don't lash out more often.
If we attack him out the blue, he rises to the challenge and accepts the outcome should he win or lose.
A culling appears to be on the cards.
When Leda invades Ansbach out of a lack of trust, Ansbach accepts her choice.
You are thorough indeed, Lady Leda. I would expect nothing less.
He also accepts your choice, whether you aid him or fight him. In fact, he is most confused by you aiding him, showing how little he believes we should think of him.
Have you lost your wits? By my troth, you have no such debt to this old man. Though I gladly welcome your decision.
He understands all the dynamics at play here, despite Leda arguably being far too extreme. No one is faultless.
As you surmise, I do have my doubts, and will not simply lay down and die with them.
A cool detail is that Ansbach only uses his longbow here, not his famous obsidian lamina. His longbow also requires extraordinary dexterity, but this is not his signature weapon, as illustrated by Freya.
Give my regards to Honourable Ansbach. Tell him, if we should meet in battle, to face your bow would be fine enough, but to face your blade would be an honour.
So does this mean that Ansbach chose not to use his most effective blade or his last resort Bloodflame technique because he has not yet made up his mind? He cannot in good conscience commit completely to betraying Leda and Miquella until he has all the information. And his thinking here is illustrated well by the last words of the encounter, should he be defeated by Leda and the Tarnished.
I have utterly failed you both. Miquella the Kind. Lord Mohg.
He still felt allegiance to both sides of the conflict. Ansbach's understanding of humanity through his own shortcomings allows him to welcome the diversity of opinions that divides the followers of Miquella. And so, when the inevitable fight ensues, he meets it head-on, with honour and respect.
I am Ansbach, of the Pureblood Knights. I stand with blade aloft, blood afire, for the dignity of my lord and master Mohg. Well, good Freya, it will be my honor to test my blade against a Redmane. Lady Leda, your suspicions were dead on. In the end, I could not bury the memories of Lord Mohg and our pact of blood.
So it is that the Tarnished can help Ansbach reach the Divine Gate of Anir Elim, where he surprises even the Tarnished.
Oh, something you want to get off your chest? Well, you needn't worry. It was you, wasn't it, who defeated Lord Mohg? Fear not. I bear no grudge against you. His Eminence was felled in an honorable duel, and such are the risks of seeking lordship. Besides, what right have I to complain? I blame the enchantment more than anything. Righteous Tarnished, we will have our victory. I swear upon my blood.
Personally, I don't think Ansbach truly believes you killed Mohg only because of Miquella's enchantment. At this point it's clear how strong the Tarnished is, so if Ansbach himself was able to resist acting on Miquella's behalf before he could ascertain just what the demigod's intentions were, then surely the Tarnished would have been able to resist as well. Tiolier and even Leda briefly see this truth.
Oh, are you not affected? Even with the spell broken?
You are an odd one, aren't you? The enchantment is broken, and yet you alone appear completely unchanged, as if nothing was ever cast upon you. No matter. If you found your way here, it was because kindly Miquella wished it so.
Though this is speculation, I like to think that Ansbach uses the charm as an excuse to ease the player from their potential guilt, to remove any possibility that we should feel bad for having killed his former lord, even if we felled him less than honourably.
The coming of our dynasty.
Instead, I believe he understands for the same reason he understands Freya or Leda. He knows what he's done and what Mohg has done isn't objectively good. He respects that others can find fault in him, just as he does himself, and that his alignment with Mohg was likely born not out of calm logic, but from a bloody desire to fight.
Haha! How readily the sensation returns. The runaway spirit of war.
And he is aware that his own purpose in Immortal is founded not on logic, but emotion. Ansbach understood that keeping his oath to his old master was not an act of logic, nor would it bear any justice, but it was for these very reasons he was unable to let go. In fact, it's for this reason I believe Ansbach treats us with such respect, naming us ever since our first meeting.
Righteous Tarnished.
Righteous is defined as morally right or justifiable. For example, he stood up for what he knew was right and died a righteous person. He respects that our decisions, our perspectives, are justifiable. Whether we kill Mohg, whether we fight him alongside Leda, he appreciates our perspective and acknowledges his shortcomings such that those who oppose him can absolutely remain righteous. Compare all this to the pitiful manner Gideon continues to assert his absolute knowledge right to his dying breath. Gideon cannot fathom how we might do what he couldn't. Where Ansbach develops unique weapons and incantations born from his own passion and skill, Gideon only copies. After scavenging spells of the most powerful beings across the land, after the Tarnished keeps killing them, he somehow learnt very little, and continues to lecture the clearly competent Tarnished about their limits. He refuses to even consider that he might be wrong, and instead chooses to fight us. He can't even let us try to enter the Erdtree. Right to his dying breath, he remains certain.
I know in my bones a Tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you. A man cannot kill a god.
So, with this appreciation of Ansbach's character, let's return to Miquella to see just how much our friend actually teaches us. Miquella was one of the most enigmatic characters in the base game, and though the DLC is arguably all about Miquella, he still stands as a far-off figure surrounded by blinding uncertainty. However, through his followers, and most of all through Ansbach, we can learn so much about Miquella and the extent of his power.
Tender Miquella's eye is no mere morsel of flesh. It is a vessel of soaring grace, proof of his Empyrean lineage. I wonder, does Miquella the Kind intend to sever his very birthright? His fate as a child of the Erdtree?
Eyes were already important in the base game, but the DLC has emphasised just how central they are to an individual's strength. Here, Ansbach makes it clear that the eye is a key vessel of power. The eyes of Empyreans, whose strength is such that they can house the power of a god and usher in a new age, are already very powerful. Then on top of that, Miquella possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all. But here we also learn that the eye is not where the power to house a god lies. Ansbach has already shown that he understands the Divine Gate better than we do, and he is surprised Miquella cast his eye aside, suggesting that Miquella did not need to do this. But it also shows that the eyes are not needed to become a god either. Miquella does not remove his Empyrean power, just the proof that he has Empyrean lineage. All that we see him truly lose is his grace, and the primary power of his Great Rune, his fate as a child of the Erdtree. Something we've looked at before on the channel is the nature of Empyreans, and whether the Two Fingers really chose them, or if all they actually do is identify them. And this new information, alongside the revelations the lore around Metyr has given us, definitely seems to confirm the false narratives around the Two Fingers. Perhaps the eyes are where gifted power resides, bestowed power, but the power to rise to godhood cannot be granted. We'll have to dive into Miquella and his alleged Age of Compassion in another video, but the other aspect Ansbach really helped to elucidate is how Miquella's Empyrean powers actually worked.
Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
But on looking closely, what surprised me is that Miquella's power is not as all-encompassing as we are led to believe. Charming others to his will is certainly a terrifying prospect, and one that culminates in the hardest boss FromSoft has ever made, even perhaps after the recent changes. But the DLC also shows where Miquella's limits are.
Once, in an attempt to free Lord Mohg from his enchantment, I challenged tender Miquella, only to have my own heart rather artfully stolen. I knew not how weak I was. I believed that with sufficient mastery, even an Empyrean would be within reach of my blade. I could not have been more mistaken.
From Leda, we learn more about this encounter.
He was the feared commander of the pure-blood knights, who cleaved open Miquella the Kind with his blood blade.
Here we've learnt a few things. First, that Miquella for a time had enchanted Mohg, but not his followers. If Miquella had enchanted more of them, then surely the Pureblood Commander would have been the first on the list, so it's safe to assume that it was initially only Mohg who fell under Miquella's influence. Second, that Ansbach's movements against Miquella not only went unseen for some time, but they weren't noticed even as he approached and successfully wounded the infamous Empyrean. Finally, we learned that Ansbach's heart was stolen, something that can happen to the Tarnished in the final fight with Radahn too. If you get caught by the grab attack twice, you'll perform the heart stolen gesture, and then die. I'm not sure what this means for Ansbach though. Just that he was killed by Miquella? Or that his heart remained stolen, that's to say, he was charmed at that point, and it was at that moment he was compelled to join Miquella's followers and pursue this quest. Whatever the case may be, the entire group of followers acts under the charm of Miquella, shown most clearly by how they're each affected after Miquella breaks his Great Rune. But what really changes at this point? They all retain their memory from under the charm. Their morals, their motivations, and their emotions remain much the same. Freya is still focused on Radahn, Hornsent on vengeance, Leda on absolute faith in Miquella, Tiolier on escaping, and Ansbach on elucidating what Miquella is up to for the sake of his previous lord. Listen to each character after the charm is lifted, compared to how they acted before.
While my devotion to kindly Miquella remains unchanged, by my troth I am not so sure about the others.
The guidance of kind Miquella remains etched into my very flesh. It's only... there's something that I must know.
Uphold his covenant, Miquella shall, and in godhood redeem our rueful clan.
Miquella's light is gone, but I stand tall.
Honestly, they haven't really changed much, except there's one clear pattern. Their emotions, their intentions are stronger. They're more impulsive, passionate, scared, cautious, curious. And if it was still unclear what powers Miquella had truly exerted over them, Ansbach makes it clear.
The fog that vexed my aging faculties has been lifted.
Miquella's power is not mind control. It is not the removal of autonomy. Otherwise, lifting the charm would have been far more jarring. Instead, I think it's apt to describe it as a fog. as a muffling of memories, as a filtering of choices that seem available. Miquella strips away the complexity of life until there is, coincidentally, only the path set out for you. But that path was already a natural option. All these characters were naturally inclined to believe in Miquella to some extent.
Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
To shrive means to hear the confession of, assign penance to, and absolve. So Miquella appears to be reaching into the hearts of men and easing their stress, their worry, their guilt, their responsibilities even. He absolves them of these difficulties of life. In this light, we can see how his epithets naturally arose. Miquella the Kind, kindly Miquella, tender Miquella. These are all very fitting for someone whose power ameliorates you of your strife and absolves you of any complications you feel. But is this really enough to make Miquella so fearsome? Why would Ansbach say there is nothing more terrifying than this? Ansbach's wisdom isn't all-knowing, but all-understanding. He sees humanity for all its flaws, as well as for its incredible power and beauty, and he has the wisdom to realize that these are not entirely separate. The difficulty and complexity of life, in the right balance, is a generative force. Conflict can help to reach better conclusions. Discourse can develop more robust and dynamic societal systems. Ansbach sees how the lands between is breaking apart in its enforced uniformity. The land needs diversity. It needs new ideas, beliefs, people, and structures. Else, everything becomes stagnant, and life loses what makes it truly alive. By removing the agency of humanity, Miquella mimics the role of a true god, almost all-powerful. That is, if his power was more direct. However, as we have seen, Miquella only muffles influences on the mind. He subdues the sharp edges of people, strips back their strength of character, and softens them to his will. And importantly, there are only a few followers of Miquella. This isn't just a game design issue where NPCs take a lot of work to develop. This is shown in Miquella's history. Long ago, the Needle Knights were in service of Miquella, but now they are no more, save for one. Miquella doesn't seem to have been able to exert his charm on that many people at once. He cannot muster an entire army through his enchantment or control a city. That's why he couldn't charm the entire Mohgwyn Dynasty, and that's why Malenia was such a valuable asset beyond her combat skill. Perhaps even why Miquella wanted Godwyn or Radahn as consorts, as opposed to Morgott or Mohg. Miquella had to be extremely tactical in choosing where to use his power, and by selecting the right people, he could indirectly end up controlling far more than his powers could have done directly. I think Miquella's power is something that appears across our world in all sorts of traditional texts. How Miquella uses his power can be good or evil, but the nature in which his influence manifests resonates strongly in my opinion with various beliefs. There's the concept of Maya in Hinduism, Mara in Buddhism, Waswas in Islam, or Satan in Christianity.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
Some of these beliefs have evil connotations, but I mean to draw comparison to the nature of their influence. Whispers in the mind that draw a person away from their natural thoughts, that cause them to stray away from righteousness, away from their spiritual goals.
Wouldst thou like to see the world?
What will you from me?
The fiction writer Brandon Sanderson uses this concept, among many others, in a series called Mistborn. The concept of ruin, the natural chaos of the world, and preservation, the natural order of the world. The former leads to no life, but similarly, the latter also does not allow change, and thus would also end life. Only through a balance of the two does life emerge, and most importantly, their influence is never direct. Instead, it is through subtle mental guidance that encourages humanity in various directions. I think Miquella's influence parallels all these concepts, but where they actively suggest emotions or thoughts, Miquella seems only to quell them. He removes everything until only a sense of love is left, such that everyone ends up following him. An interesting parallel to Rani's intentions in her own 1,000-year voyage.
My fair consort eternal,
Okay, so after learning about Miquella's power and looking at Ansbach's character, we can now return to his history as a pure-blood knight, and what this all means for Mohg's legacy. As we are all aware now, the DLC seems to vindicate Mohg after all this time, a character who just couldn't catch a break, from being shunned and locked away his whole life, to committing atrocities across the realm that ended in him sharing a bloody bedchamber with his half-brother. The base game definitely didn't depict him well. However, we now know that he was in fact enchanted by Miquella.
As if using Lord Mohg to gain entrance to the Land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort.
So Mohg wasn't responsible for taking Miquella, he was manipulated. How much more did Mohg carry out under the enchantment? After all, the role of the Mother of Truth is very relevant to the Land of Shadow, and it may just be that the act of communion somehow confers the ability to reach the Land of Shadow. Finally, Mohg beat the allegations. Acquittal on all charges. Right? Well, no. I don't think Miquella really absolves Mohg of any of his wrongdoings. As we've seen, Miquella can't simply order another demigod around as he likes. He can only help to make them focus on one aspect of their personality. As such, no matter what timeline you believe in, it was Mohg's own character that found purpose in the Mother of Truth. It was his dream to create the Mohgwyn Dynasty, alongside everything he and his followers did in its name. The horror of his secret area is a horror designed by Mohg and his passions, even if Miquella did remove any possible apprehension. I'm not even sure how much of Mohg abducting Miquella was due to Miquella's charm. To create a new order, Mohg would have needed some god-to-consort relationship, so even that would have been partly his own beliefs too. However, instead of Miquella, I think it is actually Ansbach that informs us of the truth about Mohg and his dynasty. As the pureblood commander, he stands as the best representation of how the Mohgwyn dynasty was designed, and how they intended to go forward. No wonder the nobles are so skilled and elegant in combat, if they were led by Ansbach. On the one hand, Ansbach shows grace, dignity, even wisdom. He does not presume, and displays respect even in combat. On the other hand, the reason he rose to become a pureblood commander is also due to his skill in violent combat. Each unique item Ansbach has developed shows both his qualities, the refined gentleman, and the aggressive and skilled fighting style. Unusually for a longbow, it can be wielded similarly to a light bow, provided the wielder has the extraordinary dexterity demanded. Markedly different from the finessed swordplay of the Dynast, this is an aggressive last resort of an incantation that gave rise to Ansbach's fearsome reputation. The Obsidian Edge relies not upon trickery to fulfill its violent purpose, only well-honed skill is required to rip and rend through foes, sowing blossoms of red upon the battlefield.
How readily the sensation returns. The runaway spirit of war.
What Ansbach shows is not a lack of humanity, nor only a bloodthirsty demon. And in turn, his dual-natured character depicts both the best and the worst of the Mohgwyn dynasty, two sides of the same coin. This weapon reflects White Mask Farry's manner of speech rather well, enticing in its splendour, but full of deadly consequence. Mohg is still very much the same character he was before regarding his relationship to the Mother of Truth, but similarly, we now know there is forethought, acceptance, and even class within the hierarchy he was building. His pureblood commander shows that, and shows how even those whose anger spread fear among the bloodthirsty can have incredible wisdom to share. The Iron Mask of Sir Ansbach, giving the appearance of a quiet, wise, old bearded man, but an old fear lurks beneath, together with the cold, unflinching discipline that once honed his blade, now employed to enhance blood oath and dynastic skills. And this human wisdom is something Miquella sorely lacks, shown by his entitled actions towards his brother.
He has forsaken Lord Mohg's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid tender Miquella fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
With this complicated history, perhaps Ansbach dying a heroic death is what he would have wanted. He fought against his natural emotions of paralyzing fear, and strove not just to meet Radahn in battle, but to do so with honor and respect.
General Radahn, a pleasure to see you, after all this time. But those remains do not belong to you. Lord Mohg will have his dignity.
And in the end, though it was a fruitless task trying to redeem his fallen lord, I think his dying words show that his real intentions had evolved by the time he fights alongside the Tarnished against Miquella. In his wisdom, after journeying alongside us through the realm of shadow, he saw a Tarnished whose righteous cause could change the world for the better. He saw one who finally had the potential, even the vision, not to force some extreme ideals upon the land, but to embrace what makes life so special.
Righteous Tarnished, become our new lord. A lord not for gods, but for men.
If you made it this far, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.